Good afternoon. Welcome and thank you. Gracias. Merci. Danke. Tesheka ederim. Ashkara. Valiti. Shishini. Doje. Mahalo. Thank you for tuning in to Metro Theater Company's virtual panel today. My name is Joe Fowler, and it is an honor and a privilege to serve as Metro Theater Company's managing director and as today's moderator. For those who may not be familiar with Metro Theater Company, we are St. Louis's third oldest professional theater company and St. Louis's only theater devoted exclusively to programming work that is resonant for youth and families, on stage, on tour, in classrooms, and now online. Being based in St. Louis, our offices and our performance venues sit on the traditional homelands of the Osage Nation, the Illinois Confederacy, and the Missouri. We start today's program by paying respects to their elders, both past and present, and acknowledge the privilege that we hold by living and working on the land of their ancestors. Now, you may be asking why Metro Theater Company would be presenting a panel today on the topic of multilingual learning and young people. In all that we do at MTC, we are deeply committed to ensuring that our productions and our programs can create opportunities for meaningful dialogue within families and classrooms at one level and across our entire community and our field at another level. Currently, we're running both a streaming and outdoor live production of the Very Hungry Caterpillar show, La Oruga Muy Hambrienta Espectáculo, in a Spanish-English bilingual production that brings four of Eric Carle's classic children's books to life. I'll share the story of what inspired MTC to produce the play in this way a little later, but suffice it to say, among the reasons it made sense to us was the positive benefits to young people we implicitly felt would come from bringing the play to life in two languages. As we began to get past our internal bias that led us to think that it was a good idea, we discovered that there was powerful research that proved to us just what a profound impact multilingual learning can have on young people, with benefits that are cognitive, social, and cultural in nature. Thanks to the support of the Missouri Humanities Council, we're able to assemble this panel today featuring four remarkable women with perspectives from classroom education, academic research, and direct family and lived experiences. They are Janet Dewan. Sorry, I have to remember which way is right and left on this camera. Janet Dewan, a parent of two raising multilingual children, formerly from St. Louis, who is now joining us all the way from the big island of Hawaii. Janet is also the former VP of Marketing for OCA St. Louis. Christina Rios Kelly, I got that right, my arrow pointing this time, who is a fourth grade teacher at the Naheed Chapman New American Academy in St. Louis Public School System, who teaches multilingual young people in the classroom every day and is also raising four bilingual children of her own. Christina is also the former artistic director of RS Theatricals here in St. Louis. Gabby Rodriguez, a performer, puppeteer, dramaturg, and Spanish language coach on our current production of La Oruga Muy Hambrienta Espectáculo. And last but not least, Judy Willis, almost, there we go. I'm doing my pointing as best I can. One of the nation's leading authorities on the neuroscience of learning, with 15 years of experience as a practicing neurologist and 10 years as a classroom teacher. Dr. Willis is on faculty at Williams College, but joins us today from beautiful Santa Barbara. Before we begin our conversation, we wanted to show everyone a little bit of the bilingual staging of Caterpillar Oruga to give you a feel for the show that is serving as the springboard for our conversation. The play, just like the book, is ideal for among our very youngest audience members. So there are limited words, lots of music, and some very colorful puppets. We're currently staging the play outdoors for live audiences, but we filmed the play indoors for streaming. And what you're about to see is a short excerpt of that streaming production. And it's the first moment that we're going to look at is from very early in the story, just as our favorite caterpillar is hatching.
Del huevo salió. Out of the egg came a tiny and very hungry caterpillar. una oruga muy picanita y muy hambrienta. He started to look for some food. Empezó a buscar comida.
I can promise that that is even more charming in person. We're going to begin our conversation with our panelists now, but please know that if you watching at home have any questions you'd like to raise during our conversation, you can simply post them below this video in the comments on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you may be watching. And if you're watching from our website, there is a button that you can click on in your viewing window that will let you open the video directly on YouTube so you can access the comment section there. Now, to start us off, Gabby, you are not just a performer in this production, you are also our dramaturg and were integral to the Spanish language translation. So in the clip we just saw, the translation we heard was sort of a back and forth cutting between English and Spanish, sometimes in mid-sentence. Given the way in which you sort of helped us to develop this script, I think it's important for people to know that this is the first time the play is being produced in a fully bilingual production. So we licensed this play from Rockefeller Productions, and they provided us with a complete script in English and a complete script in Spanish, but not a combined script. So your work on this production has developed that bilingual script that we are all hearing. Could you talk a little bit about the process of creating that bilingual version and what decisions came into play when you decided what would be said in which language and when?
Yeah, one of the things that we wanted to make sure is that it wasn't just a direct translation, that we weren't just going English, Spanish, English, Spanish, English, Spanish. We wanted to make sure that both languages were incorporated into the story in a way that it was seamless, the way it was flowing from one language to the other. And what we found is that it varied in each story. For example, the first story of the show, Brown Bear, Oso Pardo, we have a pattern of Spanish, English, Spanish, or English, Spanish, English in the different animals, so that the kids could get familiar not only with all the vocabulary, but also with how you form a sentence. In the rubber ducks, we were interested in them knowing the numbers, making sure that the numbers were both said in Spanish and in English, and like other vocabulary that's in the text. And then Caterpillar, it's actually one of the ones that we really tried to do a mix of both of them integrated into in a more like paragraph way, if that makes sense. But that was one of the main things that we really wanted. We didn't want it to be just a direct translation. And we also didn't want we didn't want English to overpower the Spanish in any moment. So part of my job was also to be like, okay, so the English is the dominant language, and we have to assume that most of our audiences are going to speak English. So this play needs to start with us speaking Spanish, so that they're from right from the get-go, they're hearing the second language and they're able to follow us through all the way. And I think it was really successful in that sense. So yeah, that's some of the conversation we've had. We spent about a week. It was the first week of rehearsals, just changing things and moving things around until we finally figure out the structure that we were happy with.
I think that in the end, what you came up with really serves the storytelling beautifully, and also serves the flow of the show beautifully, because the production wasn't necessarily envisioned by its creators at Rockefeller Productions to be sort of said twice every time.
Exactly, yeah.
It have to be made in the rhythm of the show. But there's a really lovely review that came out just last day or so on KDHX that made a point of sort of acknowledging how, as the reviewer was not a Spanish speaker herself, but that she was able to follow the story in both languages and catch sort of the meaning as things went along. There wasn't a sense of loss of meaning because of this multilingualism, which I think is beautiful. Now,
yeah,
Judy, I'd love to take this next question to you, this approach of mixing both languages together, sort of within a sentence, it is one form of bilingualism that I know you've looked at young people, but there's also this extensive research on bilingualism in children who may be raised in a home where the dominant language that's at home is not the dominant language of the country. There's a really wonderful article of yours that you wrote for Psychology Today that addresses the way in which this changes how what you referred to as the executive functions of how the brain works. Could you just talk a little bit more about that and how cognitively bilingualism shapes young people?
I definitely will, and that's a super great question. But I'm going to flip it a little because in TPR total, well, someone help me, anyway, when I work with children, bilingual children, total physical response, right? So I'm going to go back a step before your question. Total physical response is what you're doing. Kids are familiar with something like a video they watch of Cinderella or the book that they love, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. So to have the comfort zone, I won't go into the whole amygdala thing. You can look at my articles, but the fact that somebody's comfortable, oh yeah, hungry, I bet. So total physical response. So if somebody doesn't speak English or doesn't speak Spanish and they're a bilingual program, very hungry, hungry caterpillar. So that system in theatrical venue is incredibly powerful. If you still want me now at this point to go into the neuroscience of how it builds bilingual kids who have a bilingual exposure, how they get higher executive function, reading comprehension, vocabulary, and actual intelligence, we'll do that. But that's not maybe what you want to hear right now.
Well, I think that of executive function would be interesting to dig into more. Because I think that's a concept that a lot of people might not be familiar with. And it was fascinating to me in reading your research to see, what it means for sort of cognitive decision-making as people, language switch, code switch, in which they are viewing the world through different forms of language.
Okay, remember, it's Joe asked for this. If any of you start getting drifting off, I did too when I was introduced to neuroscience. Neuroscience, suck it up, hungry caterpillar. But what's happening in the bilingual brain is phenomenal. A lot of this research, I can send you the references, but by Alice Stock in Canada, here's what is predicted it's happening. The brain of a kid growing up wants to survive like a hungry caterpillar. It wants to make good decisions. It wants to know what to do to get food, sleep, comfort. So the brain is set up to let in language information. So if it's a bilingual exposed brain, it's letting in language A, let's say the language in the home, and language B, the language in the community or in the community theater or in the books or in the experiences. So true bilingual, and I can't promise you that this research relates to beyond bilingual to learning later. I can only quote the research on bilingual, but here's what's happening presumably in the brain, like Bialystuk's research. The brain is set up to survive. So it's set up even in infancy. If there's one language coming in and another language, the brain is set up to suck in and respond, to take its needs, to get satisfied, like the hungry caterpillar. So when information is coming in one language and it's coming in another language, 3 executive functions. Now I'll tell you what the executive functions are, and then I'll tell you why bilingual works. In the prefrontal cortex, the 20% of the brain that's in front of the forehead area, that's like really the high-end real estate. That's the area of rapidly developing neural circuits that will continue to develop and serve. If they're developed early, they'll develop more strongly or faster. So they're set up to just survive in this little 1, 2, 3-year-old. So one language is coming in, another language is coming in. They're set up. They don't need any help. They're set up to build 3 powers. What is important? What should I block? And what should I let in? Prioritizing, discriminating, and selecting. That's a lot of information I'm going to be sharing at this point, but the bilingual brain on neuroimaging and neuroelectric studies shows these little kids' brains are building those powers. So as they are programmed to block the distracting, the not appropriate language at the moment, as they are programmed to select and let in the language that is important at the moment, they're set up for that. That's what their brains are trying to do, to get milk or to get held or to go to the new diaper. So bilingual kids show more neuroplastic, more development, more white matter, more neural circuits in their prefrontal cortex, because what are their prefrontal cortex doing? They're not doing this because they want to be smart. They have to prioritize which is most important stuff coming in, which stuff should I block, and how do I block it, and then how do I pursue what I need to know now and flip back and forth. Look at their brains as they develop, when they are building this bilingualism. We can see more white matter, more neural links, and in school, more intense reading comprehension, intelligence, if you want to judge intelligence by what we have now, IQ tests, and more attention. Because their attention focus has to block what's not critical for their survival and select what is. That was a really long answer. I hope you can edit it.
That's actually great, Judy, because I think it does give us that context of what, at the basic building block level, what are the true cognitive benefits that we're looking at of bilingualism. You're talking in some degree about young people, though, who are sort of born into an environment in which both languages are sort of comparably present. Now, Christina, I'd love to turn to you to talk a little bit, because you're teaching at the 4th grade level, and for many of the young people that you teach, that language barrier between what's spoken at home and what's spoken outside the home really is only one of the challenges that these young people are carrying. I know many of your students are refugees that are coming from corners of the world that are in great crisis. They have experienced great trauma, and now here they are in a new place, perhaps surrounded by people who speak a very different language than they're used to. But as you see your students learn English, what challenges do you see them facing as they sort of work through that cognitive process, that acculturation process of bringing that new language into sort of their mouth, into their voice, into their thinking? And are there breakthroughs that you see when, as they approach greater fluency, that kind of match some of what Judy was saying with respect to sort of increased discernment, increased ability to sort of better navigate circumstances because they have acuity in both languages?
Well, I think it's really important to remember, also my lifelong, like my life rule for myself is, if I'm asked multiple questions, I only answer one. But I'm going to make an exception for you. I'm like, I will answer the most recent one. No, so I think it's really important to remember that my students are migrants and refugees. So in addition to acclimatizing really to a brand new culture, and really in many ways sort of kind of like being forced to learn an entire new language, they're also dealing with some pretty terrifying trauma at an extremely young age that's going to block a lot of those processing skills that we would normally see in baseline children their age. So I don't know that I can give you an answer that says like, absolutely, what I just heard totally happens in front of me every day. I mean, the sheer amount of trauma that they're processing while they're also trying to figure out what a predicate is something that I don't think it's really possible to understand, especially not in a virtual panel. But it's really not possible to understand unless you're present for it or experiencing it. On a basic level, I always tell them, like, the number one thing, my number one job is to keep them safe. I really think of it in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that my job first is to keep them safe. And frankly, if that's all that I end up teaching them, I think that's a pretty well spent year. So I always tell them that my job is to keep them safe. I do that because it is true. Also because I don't think that they're ever going to have a process. They're never going to have the ability to, self-actualize and get to the top unless they feel like they're in a place where things are going to be all right. Also, I'm a big believer in all fourth grade classrooms, in all classrooms, period. I don't think we do a good enough job, educationally speaking, of letting children know that we want them to make mistakes. We in this country have a very arrow goes one way sort of idea about how we tell children that they should be learning things, and if they don't, then they've only regressed, when in reality it's when we make mistakes that we learn. Just on a basic level, I tell them, my number one job is to keep them safe, and my number one rule is English is weird. Like, I can't help you with that. English is just weird. Like, I know Spanish and French and English and a sizable amount of Italian and enough Russian to like figure out where to sleep and get a beer. But I can tell you that English is weird. Like, it's just weird. It doesn't follow any of the rules. I don't feel like, as somebody who's spoken it their entire lives, that I'm an expert at it, because I just find it to be incredibly strange. So they're like, why is it like that? I'm like, number one rule, English is weird. I can't help you with that. So a lot of what we try to do is, I have worked into our morning meeting routine, and really I've worked into the very fabric of my classroom, kind of forcibly placing those strange amount of English issues throughout their day. So they have plenty of opportunities to fail and plenty of opportunities to succeed, in terms of just words like fifth, like that TH. I always say that thing. Like, I remember drilling that. Like, that is hard. That's a uniquely English thing right there, to be that forward for and then open up so that you're bright, but then also to be able to take the exact same tongue placement and push it back for thing. Like, it's weird. It's just weird, and you have to be prepared to fail. So every day we do a calendar. Every day we talk about the day, not just like today, but if yesterday was the 2nd, today is the 3rd. Today is the 3rd, and we've got to get that to the to the d. So it also helps that I'm a classically trained opera singer and a vocal coach. I think I find using that more than anything. And then you also have to kind of throw into the blender the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're all wearing masks. So the ability to model a lot of the language challenges that are incredibly unique to what they're experiencing is just absolutely impossible. So do I see changes? Absolutely. I had a child start in my class in January who only knew the word okay, and everything he said was okay. He is working through a lot, and he is getting to the point that he can do sounding out sentences, full sentence. I mean, it's fantastic. I think you have to celebrate everything, but that's huge. It's barely May. He's been in my class for 4 months. But I think the biggest thing is you have to know what you're shooting for. Like, are you shooting for absolute and utter fluency? In which case, I would challenge anybody to go ahead and just drop themselves into the middle of a country at some point in their adolescence and see how quickly they get fluent. But my kids are the strongest, most incredible people I've ever known, and they just only know how to fail up. They're fantastic. But yeah, THs are weird. English is weird. I don't understand the whole noun adjective placement still. I think it's ridiculous. I think the fact that especially like in different parts of the country, their voices go up, and like in any other language, that would mean a question, but it's not. Like, there's a lot of subtleties about the English language that I would love to just.
And I think you make an excellent point about the experience of dropping yourself into a new place that speaks a different language at any age, at any level of knowledge or intelligence. You will seem like you don't know what you are doing if you cannot form the words yourself, and it will take you a time to figure out how to form the words. And if nothing else, being able to appreciate that if someone's speaking English inflected with an accent of another country, it means they already speak another language fluently, right? That this is a sign of strength, that they are now also speaking in whatever language it is that you are speaking. And, for the languages that I have studied, I know I am far from perfect in just about all of them. And am amazed by anyone who can learn this language. But I'm the moderator, not a panelist here. So let me take us to the next person before I share personal anecdotes that are not of help to the cause. I'd love to pass things over next to Janet and just sort of talk to you a little about your experiences, because I know that in your case, you're raising children to be multilingual as an intentional choice rather than out of an essential necessity. And I think in the case of Christina's students, learning more than one language, learning English is an essential necessity. You have made the choice to make sure that your children have a multilingual upbringing. Could you talk a little bit about the ways in which the different languages you are teaching your children have come into play while you're raising them, and why you decided that this was an important priority in your children's upbringing?
Sure. A lot of that is drawing back to the generation and the generation before that and their experience coming here to the United States. I myself have the privilege of being born in St. Louis, Missouri. However, my parents, they came here during the refugee crisis in the mid-70s in South Vietnam. And because the South Vietnam was allies with the United States, it was an essential part of my father, especially who knew 4 languages, being Cantonese, Mandarin, English, and Vietnamese. That played a huge part of why he himself survived coming to the United States as a refugee and bringing ultimately my mother and then immediate family members and relatives over from that experience. So it was more of an essential part of his lived experience. For me, it's the choice to be able to bring my children, my son and daughter now who's 8 and 3 respectively, with more than one language, because my husband's side has a Filipino heritage and I have a ethnically Chinese heritage. So Cantonese being the primary language spoken when I grew up, as well as a little bit of Mandarin. But my husband's side is Tagalog, which is a predominant Filipino language from the Philippines. And so just helping them to learn the different languages not only helps them build a better relationship, a deeper relationship with their own grandparents. Thankfully, they have a good grasp of English at the moment, but it gives them a deeper understanding of their own ethnic or heritage, as well as build a relationship with people in the community wherever they might come across somebody who has a similar experience or background. So that is the short answer to why I choose to bring my children up with more than one language, multilingually in this case. And just to be able to ultimately be able to build connections not only with the community, but maybe even a bigger purpose than just that. With a lot going on in the climate these days, there's a lot of things that require a lot of building blocks to build communities together, to say the least, especially during this pandemic. So I hope that while this is more of an essential thing for my family, that it becomes part of something more structural, so that we can build more peaceful relationships with people with many different backgrounds.
That's great. And I think we've kind of touched on some of the cognitive benefit. That's kind of hinting to some of the cultural and social benefits, right? The more that people can understand each other wherever they come from, the less there are things that divide us. If language can connect us, if art can connect us, then perhaps that we can see more of those similarities and respect and honor our differences, but not presume that our differences make us divided from one another, but rather that our differences can connect us to one another. I know. Oh yes. Please.
I also wanted to add, it's the word strength with the TH, Christina and you, Joe, mentioning the word strength. My grandfather, before he passed in October 2020, one of the words he had to learn before he received the citizenship in the United States was learning. One of the words I remember when I was in the classroom with him as he was learning English was the word strength. And I can understand why the TH is so difficult to learn, but it also ties into why I teach my children different languages, because it builds a stronger community. It just adds strength to all the difficulties that we see around us, and whether it's just the difficulties of all the conflicts that we see around us in the world.
Well, Gabby, you've had the experience of being raised first in a Spanish-speaking country and then coming to the United States during your childhood. From your own kind of personal experience, we've been talking a lot about how do young people develop. In this case, you are someone who has been that young person, right, and has developed into an extraordinary theater artist and many other wonderful things. But could you just maybe share a little bit of your personal experiences as you went from being a monolingual young person to being a bilingual young person?
Well, I still can't pronounce the TH sound. Just dropping that in there. I have still no context of what that is. I pronounce this. I use the D sound instead of a TH sound. I'm working through it. But yes, English is weird. Completely agree. Yeah, I came here when I was in middle of 8th grade, getting into high school. So relatively older. And I didn't speak any English. I remember the first day that I was in the classroom, I went to a charter school in Houston, Texas. And my uncle was a teacher, and Houston, Texas has a huge Latinx population. So the charter school actually had a lot of people that were bilingual. But I remember that I just kept saying, like, I want to speak English so that I can learn it faster. And I remember that the first day of school, they asked me one question. They were asking everybody in the classroom. They were like, so what's one thing you like to do? And everybody was supposed to reply. And I had no idea how to say a sentence in English, but I kept listening to what people were saying. And I was like, okay, so everybody's saying the word like. So that must be something that I need to put into my sentence. I know that the word I means me. So, and everybody keeps saying I, and then this other word like that I don't know what it means, but everybody's saying that. And then I was like, I remember that I saw in a TV show that tennis is said the same in English and in Spanish. So they got to me, and the teacher's like, oh, you don't have to respond. Like, we know you don't speak English. And I was like, no. I like tennis. Never seen a tennis match in my entire life. Never played tennis. No idea. I don't even really like it. But I just remember like putting the context clues together, and that was the way that I started to learn. And that was the way that I started to learn, period. Like I would point at something, and my friends would be like, oh, that's a pencil, and I would be like, great, that's a pencil, and I would repeat it, and I would like, that's how I started forming sentences, by just listening to people, watching a lot of television, and listening to a lot of music too. To this day, I can rap all of Eminem, just because I don't know if that's good or bad, but just the play on words was so interesting to me, and it was something that I picked up fairly quickly. But I remembered it was hard getting here, because I was, you go from being like a good student in your country, and then you get here, and as much as you want to try to like bridge the gap, even if you know what the equation in the math problem is, if you don't understand what the math problem is asking you, you're going to get the question wrong. So it was a big like fall getting into like going from like, like getting good grades in a different country to like getting here and like going to a failing grade because I just can't understand what the question's being asked. So I'm really grateful for my teachers like Christina, who would, like, if we had a test, they would be like, okay, come here and I will translate for you. Or I will tell you what this means and you go figure the question out. So it was a lot of listening, also a lot of not being afraid of speaking the language. I think that's the theater artist in me. I was never afraid of just saying it wrong. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll mispronounce that. Until this day, I will most certainly confidently mispronounce many things. And people are like, what did you just say? And I'm like, obviously this. Do you not get it? Of course. And it was really interesting. Getting here to St. Louis was a whole different thing, like a whole other cultural shock. Because I couldn't even hear that I had an accent until I got to theater school, and you start taking like, IPA, and like you start to figure out how to do accents when you act. And I was like, wait a second, do I have an accent? And everybody was like, yes. And I was like, oh no, I couldn't hear that. So yeah, it's a lot of listening, a lot of trial and error, and I still mispronounce a lot of things and still don't know what the TH sound is, but yes.
Thank you, Gabby. I would love to take this next question to Christina, because we've talked a little bit about what you've seen in your classroom. But in your home, you're raising your 4 children to be bilingual as well. Can you talk a little bit about some of the experiences you've witnessed with your own children as they use both languages? And I won't ask you more than one question. That was my question.
I was waiting. I was so ready for that. Yeah, I guess I know the way the world works. And so I knew that it didn't matter what I taught them at home, they were going to get 98% of their lives in English, outside of the door of our home in St. Louis, Missouri. So I thought, well, this is a really unique opportunity with brand new humans to give them as much as I can at home. And I just really tried to focus on, especially, with children, period, you want to emphasize routine. Like, not only does it make them feel safe. There's a billion reasons they need routine and they need parameters. But also when teaching languages, and I don't know if Janet, I'm sure she's experienced this too, like when you're teaching routines, it's so much easier to be like, and it's this and this, and it's that and that, and it's this and this, and it's that and that. And you can just start to begin to use them interchangeably. And that's sort of a way to immediately lay the groundwork for the fact that this is the same thing. It's just a different way of saying it. Now, the culture in this exciting time that we're living in has made it, I think, a little less comfortable for us to speak Spanish over the last 4 or 5 years. So we just kind of stopped outside of the house. So we do it now primarily in the house, but it made outings so much fun. Like, the grocery store is the greatest library in the entire world. There's just a million things to talk about and a million things to compare and contrast and things to rhyme and things to put together as groups. I'm serious, like if you are a stay-at-home parent, or if you're just a parent who's got like an hour and like, what am I going to do? Like the grocery store is better than Disney World, and everything is a fast pass. It has been really interesting though, because I think culturally it's sort of, so my husband is a non-Latinx person. He is a dominant culture gentleman. And my children did not think he was American. My youngest child told me the other day he found out he was American from me, because he said he felt really bad for dad because he's not a citizen. And I was like, well, we don't have to feel bad about citizen, but also wait, what are we talking about? And he said, well, he doesn't have a hyphen. Like, yeah, no. He's like, he speaks English really well, though. Dad's doing really well with that. So I think they sort of are growing up in their own little microcosm, where they believe that everybody does things in multiple languages. But I'm also really cognizant of all of the incredible amounts of privilege that go into the fact that when my children apply for college or go into high school, it's such a boon, right? That they're bilingual. And it's so interesting. Whereas my students will be talked to in all likelihood after they leave my school or my class, as if there's something wrong with them, as if they're just not as intelligent. We sort of set up this idea of bilingualism as something that is really, really amazing and difficult to attain, and just this, it really shows how high class you are and how well your parents were able to teach you. But when we're talking about bilingualism and people from other countries, all of a sudden it becomes, why don't you learn how to speak English? So we try to have those conversations a lot at home. And what does it mean to know how to say things in different ways? And the ultimate reason is it makes the world bigger for us. Like, this is how we make more friends. This is how we find more things to be excited about. This is our front yard, our house, and our backyard.
Burden. I don't know what my own father emigrated here from Germany, and someone shouldn't experience as a result another young person any differently, because you've lived in St. Louis as well for many years, but you're now in Hawaii, and where the population is white, we're a spoken. I'm just curious, being in a different environment made it easier, or maybe made it
where most people don't look like me, and here it's more of of my spouse's job move. So off the bat, I'm faced with a new environment for myself and my family, and I think I'd like to think that St. Louis did give me the wings, and my family the wings to I guess set up ourselves in a way where we, being brought up in St. Louis and born there, we've deeply rooted ourselves in many of the, of course, with our parents, family, and our community, have tried to bring up our children with that environment to learn Cantonese, Mandarin, as well as a little bit of Tagalog from the father side of the family. Coming here to Hawaii with where most people, it's a sea of minorities here, meaning there's so many different ethnic groups here to draw from. The benefits of that is that I don't have to struggle in the way that I did in St. Louis, trying to find those small pockets or enclaves of communities where I can bring my children to. Whereas here, it's I see everybody who's either speaking Olilo or Hawaiian. There's some people who are speaking predominantly in Spanish or Japanese. I mean, we hear it everywhere we go, in the grocery stores. I'm thinking of the playground and whatnot. And so that makes it easier on us contextually. Just speaking for my own experience in my family, trying to teach my children Chinese or Mandarin, well, mostly Cantonese, since that's what I was brought up with. Most of the ethnic Chinese who do speak Cantonese are on the island of Oahu. So we're on Big Island, though most of the community is in Oahu. So that brings up a new challenge, though geographically we are closer. So, whenever we are in a position where we can fly there, we can. So that makes it easier in a way. So there are some nuances to the challenges of living and being and raising our children here. But like I guess with St. Louis, the challenge was having the environmental experience, having access to those structures in place and the curriculum in the school. Here in Hawaii, many of the schools already have built into the curriculum. Well, like St. Louis, there's Spanish, but here there's also Hawaiian or Japanese, and depending on what school you go to, I'm sure in Oahu they have it in their curriculum, the Chinese language as well. But I guess with the representation here, it helps to bring up our children here where that challenge is probably greater if I were in St. Louis. So that, in a nutshell, gives you a sneak peek of what it might be like to cross over from St. Louis to Hawaii and living here.
Thank you, Janet. And it does sound like in many ways the benefits outweigh the challenges, because there is just a multilingual, multicultural culture surrounding you as you work to give that gift to your children. I know that we had a little bit of a script for things we wanted to do in what order, but we're also running short on time. So I wanted to take a question to Judy, and then maybe look at one more clip from the Very Hungry Caterpillar show. And I know, Janet, you have a clip as well that we maybe could take a look at that I think would just warm everyone's heart too. But before we go into a few more clips, Judy, I'd love to get your perspective for children who aren't yet bilingual or multilingual. What can parents do to help foster an environment that helps them begin to gain some of the skills and benefits that come with speaking their own language?
I love your question. Oh, is this sounding funky? Echoey? Do you hear echo, or am I just stoned?
I think we're hearing some echo at the moment. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Let's come back to that question. How
about now?
Now you're great.
Okay. So you have such amazing people. You, Gabby, Janet, Christina. My notes could be a new Journal of Neuroscience response. So let me just do a 30-second nugget and stop me if it's more than 30 seconds. I adopted a baby from Korea who was 3 months old. And 3 months old, and people would not infrequently say, "Oh, was it hard for her to learn English?" She's 3 months old. What language did you speak when you were 3 months old? Later, in high school, she started studying Korean because she embraced it as we did, and we studied with her. Embrace the neuroscience in encouraging the prefrontal cortex, executive planning, prioritizing, organizing. Beyond all that is the empowerment, as you've all said, the empowerment to make mistakes, to be okay about them, and then to get beyond them, to realize your potential is extraordinary. You don't have to worry about your white Anglo-Saxon parents bringing you to China to learn Mandarin so you can get into Princeton. I really, really encourage everything that happens in the brain of a child who's exposed to more than one language, just like the hungry caterpillar embraces food.
Well, that might be a lovely segue to just see a teeny bit more of the the production itself. Eric Carle's books in so many ways are kind of a brilliant springboard to teach people of all ages new languages, sort of like you were saying about the grocery store, Christina, right? Like, here are all the things, right? Here are all the foods, here are the colors. You know, each of his stories allows us an opportunity to sort of to teach certain things with repetition, thoughtfully, in a way that can help stick. And the kinesthetic experience of seeing the artist perform that live further reinforces what that meaning might be. But of course, in the Very Hungry Caterpillar show, we learn the names of foods, we learn the days of the week, we learn numbers. So we want to take just a brief look at one moment that everyone remembers from the book. We'll at least get to see the first 2 days of our caterpillar's journey towards becoming what is next in the caterpillar's life. So let's take a look at that.
On Monday, el lunes, he ate through. Comió y comió. Una manzana. One apple. But he estaba hambrienta. Still hungry. On Tuesday, el martes, he ate through. Comió y comió. Dos peras. 2 pears. But he estaba hambrienta. Still hungry.
Who doesn't remember that moment from that book? Janet, I think you actually have something that is an example of your children with the Very Hungry Caterpillar. I think there's a photo maybe we were going to bring up on screen.
Yes, this is a photo of my son when he was 3 months old eating the Very Hungry Caterpillar book. So it's not just for reading, but can be for eating too.
I believe the book encourages eating and the joy that can come with healthy eating on the whole, right? We get plums, we get pears, we get apples. It's only later we get to the chocolate cake and the lollipop and the ice cream cone. And at least he doesn't eat those, in mass. He's eating 1 ice cream cone, not 5, like he eats at naranjas, right? So there's mostly healthy eating choices being made here. I would love to ask you, as we're starting to wrap things up, Janet, is there any advice you might give, sort of like similar to what I'd asked Judy, but is there any advice you might give to parents that want to raise children to be multilingual? What can they do to sort of model some of what you're doing in your own home right now?
To put it simply, it's never too late for us as parents to learn as well as to teach our children. And also, it just takes 3 things: a little bit of inspiration, appreciation, and some dedication, a lot of dedication to bring that all to light. So that's all I would offer as advice for parents.
Thank you. And Christina, you were talking about creating a safe environment for your students, making sure that they are, that if nothing else, when they're in your classroom, they know that they are taken care of, they're loved, they're respected. But that's something they deserve outside of the classroom as well. That's something we all deserve outside of any spaces that we might have. Is there any advice or feedback you might give to parents of children who don't primarily or exclusively speak English, to help improve the lives and the experiences of those young people that you teach, that may be new to this country and are still learning English for themselves? How can English-speaking children be better allies for children that are learning English as their second or third language? You only have to answer the second question.
I was gonna say that was more than one. I mean, English speaking children can be allies to their classmates in their classroom community by recognizing that this is a community. Like I tell my kids all the time, like this is a classroom community, and just like any community, it only works when we all work together. So my students only get 4 semesters of education at my school before they go to their neighborhood school. So depending when they enter the country, they only get 4 semesters and they go into their neighborhood school. And those neighborhood schools could become much more friendly and much more open and much more welcoming if we sort of all recognized that it's an outside in sort of thing rather than from the inside out. I mean, yes, change always begins with us, but like, you know, that's more for t-shirts. Like if we create a community with our children at home that allows them to understand that our community only works when everybody is doing their job, when everybody is showing each other respect, when everybody recognizes that, you know, a weak link doesn't make somebody stronger, it makes everything weaker, then that transfers into what they take into the classroom. You know, that's where you can stop bullying. That's where you can stop isolating experiences. That's where you can stop, you know, all of that is really just by teaching people that you're part of something bigger all of the time.
Thank you. That is wonderful. There is so much more we could talk about. I want to be respectful of everyone's time on the panel and of our audience members at home. So I'm going to take a second to wrap a few things up and then give room for everyone to say a few seconds of last words if they have them. So first and foremost, I want to thank our panelists for being here today, and I want to thank everyone who's watching at home. I also want to take a moment to thank our presenting sponsor for the Very Hungry Caterpillar Show, the John and Carolyn Peterson Foundation, for their very generous underwriting, and once again, the Missouri Humanities Council for their support of the production and specifically this panel today. If you would like to see the show for yourself, I do have some very good news. We'll be making the public announcement a little bit later this week, but since you're all tuning in and you're watching right now, I'm happy for you to be among the very first to know. Thanks to popular demand, we are extending the run of the Very Hungry Caterpillar Show, La Ruga Muy Hambrienta Espectáculo, until May the 23rd. Our additional performances will go on sale in the next day or so, so please visit our website. And here's Yoda, equally thrilled about this news, which is great. You can get tickets for the rest of the regular run online at metroplays.org now, and you can get tickets for the streaming production, which is licensed for household viewing across 10 states there as well. If you're a teacher, there's information on our website about how to book the streaming production into your school. Currently, MTC is also streaming 2 plays by Idris Goodwin, Jacked, a hip-hop retelling of the Jack and the Beanstalk story, produced with hand-drawn animations, and an archival recording of our 2016 production of And in This Corner, Cassius Clay. We hope you might consider joining us for one or both as well. And our virtual summer camps will begin in June and are a great way to connect young people from across our region and across our country. Last year, we had campers join us from as far away as Boston and Mexico City. Now, I'd love to give each of our panelists a chance to say a few final words. So if you have a few final words, I won't even raise a question because that would be too directive. If you have any final words, let's just go around round robin. And Gabby, let me start with you. Everything is backward on my screen still.
I would say for every kid out there who's learning a new language, don't be afraid. Take up space with your language, with your culture, with who you are. Don't treat it as a secondary thing. Just treat it as the thing that belongs to you. And to every theater company out there, I encourage them to incorporate new languages into their material in a way that is not just a direct translation or a sticky note, but rather find ways to integrate it, which is why I've loved working on the Very Hungry Caterpillar, is because we feel like we found ways of bringing 2 languages together and not prioritize one over the other. So I encourage all theaters across the nation to incorporate that in some way.
Gabby, thank you. And thank you for being such an instrumental part of this production and making it possible. Dr. Judy Willis, any last words?
Well, thank you, Joe, John, Gabby, Christina, Janet. And You know, when I went to medical school, and then I decided I should become a teacher to share the neuroscience of learning with educators. I knew I could learn a lot in teacher education, but I continue to be a lifelong learner. So a project like this, Realia, for those of you who are not in instruction, Realia, experiencing it, seeing, smelling it, touching it, experiencing every moment. And there's nothing that allows you to do that more inclusively than bilingually. And I so promote it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're going to bring your website up on the screen if you'd like to read more of Dr. Willis's incredible research, her articles across all manner of cognitive science, neuroscience, and education in young people. It's an extraordinary resource. I'd encourage anyone to check it out. Next, I'm going to ask Janet if you can share a final word or two.
Sure. I'd like to thank all of you, especially you, Joe, and the Metro Theater Company for giving me this opportunity to speak with everyone who is able to be a viewer. I also want to thank everyone who has, in St. Louis, family, friends, community members, mentors, even my little Facebook group, Asian American Mommy Support Group, just to give me the support during my journey and to be a part of this. So thank you all for everything.
Janet, do you want to show your video real quick? It's so adorable.
Please, I would
see it.
Thank you. This is my son.
E. Er. Sang. Shi. Du. Liu. Di. Bo. Jiu. Shi.
Yay! High five.
Apple.
My apple. Thank you. That's
could have done that at that age. As Christina said before we started, he needs representation because he could sell that apple next at a very high price in a TV commercial potentially.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Christina, let you have the last word from our panelists, and then I'll just say one or two words to wrap up.
It's super rude to make me follow that. I'm just throwing that out there. That's the meanest. I would just, not so casual reminder that there is no national language in the United States of America. There isn't. And the wonderful thing about that is then that puts us all on the same level. So if you are out and you're hearing another language, recognize that you are in a unique position because of the incredible place that you are, that you get to be surrounded by people who bring their culture with their language. And that is what language is. It's an extension of your culture and it's an extension of your background. So if you have one language, that's okay. You can always add another if you want to, or you can be happy with the one that you have, but recognize that it's an extension of the very basic level of who people are. So let's be really kind and let's be really cognizant of what we're doing when we are appreciating instead of attacking.
Thank you, Christina. If nothing else, let us all leave this being kinder than we were, being more open than we were, and seeing what we can learn when we hear and we listen to things that are said just in a slightly different way than we're used to, because we can communicate just as well in that language as we communicate in our first tongue if we apply ourselves to make that effort for anyone. So I would be remiss as we wrap up if I didn't let everyone who is watching at home know that Give STL Day is coming up on Thursday here in St. Louis, which is a great opportunity to support any nonprofit that you might believe in. Over, I think, just under 1,000 nonprofits in St. Louis participated last year, and collectively an extraordinary amount was raised on that single day. So if you're inspired to help Metro Theater Company continue to further programs like these, productions like Caterpillar, and to provide arts-based curriculum into schools all over our region, please consider making a donation to Metro Theater Company that day, but also please consider a donation to any other organization that touches your heart. There are so many extraordinary nonprofits that need help as we're coming towards the end of the COVID pandemic, and every gift, whether it's $1, $5, $10, collectively makes a real impact. So I hope you'll give to Metro, but please don't only give to Metro this coming Thursday during Get STL Day. You can look us up and you can see all the nonprofits that are participating when you go to givestlday.org. And you can go to our website and find out just about us there too. But once you click through, find out about all the other nonprofits as well. Once again, huge thanks, Gabby, Janet, Christina, Judy. It's been such a pleasure being here with you for this conversation. Thank you for being with us. Thank you everyone at home for joining us, and have a great evening.
Thank you.